Hello students, welcome to the answer writing program. So today we will be discussing three questions from GS3 agriculture portion, and the topics are major cropping patterns in various parts of the country, different types of irrigation and irrigation system, storage, transport and the marketing of agricultural produce, and some constraints related to that, e-technology in the aid of farmers, and the second topic is land reforms in India. So let's take an overview of all the three questions. So the first question is related to integrated farming systems. Second question is related to the millets production and the potential of the millets. Third question is related to the land pooling as an alternative to the land acquisition in India for the various developmental prospects. Okay. So let's start with the first question. What is an integrated farming system? This is the first demand of the question. And second, it is asking that how is it helpful in the context of Indian agriculture? This is second demand. Okay, so what is integrated farming system? By the name itself, it is saying that the farming system which integrates the multiple things. Like it is a sustainable agricultural system that integrates crop production along with livestock, along with horticulture, biogas, agroforestry, aquaculture, poultry, duckery, vegetables, etc. So we are not just doing the monocropping or like the two crops at a time, but we are integrating various other aspects also, like these aspects. So this integrated farming system is based on one concept that there is no waste. Means the waste from the one aspect is included or is used as the input for the other aspect. It means we are not wasting anything. Now, what is waste? Waste is when it is misplaced in the whole system. It means it is not getting reused, or it means we cannot make a use of that waste. Then only it is termed as waste. But if we are using that waste from the one aspect into the input of the other aspect, then it is not waste. Instead, it is termed as a resource. So this is the integrated farming system. Let's suppose, take an example of the crops. So crops output, whatever the yield is, we are selling it into the market, and the other waste like the stubble is there. So instead of putting it as a waste, we are using it into the biogas plant for the gas generation. So the waste from this aspect is using the input for the other aspect. The agroforestry, poultry, vegetables, duckery, aquaculture. So the waste from agroforestry, poultry is using as the input for the other aspects. So there is no waste as it is. So that is why it is integrated farming system, and it is based on the concept of the no waste. And you can write some definition in the introduction that it is a sustainable approach integrating these particular components, and this core concept is we are utilizing waste as a resource for the other component. Okay, let's see this diagram. You can also make one cycle related to that, how the waste from the one aspects is using as an input for the other aspects. Like the biogas, the waste is slurry, and slurry is used in the like the fertilizer for the crops, etc. Then crop residues are used as the input for the cattle, and the output for the animal, like the waste from the animals, again it is used as the input for the biogas production. So this is again like acting as a whole ecosystem where one particular aspect is dependent on other. So we are increasing the efficiency of the whole system. How we can increasing the efficiency? We are increasing the efficiency of the soil. We are reducing the input cost, like for the crops production. We are not dependent on the outside fertilizers now, etc. So we are increasing the efficiency. We are making the optimal use of resources in this particular system. Okay, so this is integrated farming system. Now, the main body part is about, we need to write down the potential of the integrated farming. So you can divide it into two aspects, like for the farmer's point of view and from the farm point of view, because Indian agriculture is about this. So for the farmer, how it is beneficial? It helps in increasing the farmer's income, because the farmer is not only dependent on the crop production, so on the yield of the crops, so as to sell in the market, but now the farmer's income is more diversified. It can he can take returns from by selling this, by reducing the input cost for the fertilizer, by selling the meat, milk, etc., from the poultry, from the cattle, etc. And also it helps in increasing the farmer's income, the diversification of the income, and also the climate change impact, because we know that the climate change is a reality, and the climate change impacts very disproportionately and harshly on the agriculture plus water resources. But if we make our system resilient, more efficient, then we can withstand with this negative impacts of the climate change. So for the farmers, with the brunt of climate change also, this system holds potential to show some resilience. Okay, so the farmers, we have the multiple points with respect to the farms. Now the crop productivity is increased, because again the nutrient recycling is very good. Top layer of the soil is not depleting, instead they are recycling at a very faster pace. The inputs are not getting wasted, instead they are absorbing in the soil, making as a whole ecosystem. So the productivity is increased for the farm, and on the farm not only the crops are there, but the whole livestock, poultry, duckery, fish farming is there, agroforestry is there. So the whole ecosystem has been being built. So the whole productivity of the farm is increased. And the second is, it helps in effective waste management. It means we are not doing any waste or producing any waste, instead they are being utilized as the resources in this ecosystem or in this whole system. Then it enhances the soil health. Yes, we have already discussed this, because we reduces, or we can say we can eliminate the chemical fertilizers use, and it helps in improving the soil health. Okay, moving on to the next part, like it is a 10 marker question. If it is asking about how it is helpful in the Indian agriculture, you can also write that what are some challenges in its adoption. So there are the challenges with respect to the economic viability and with respect to the social viability. Economic viability is like high upfront cost is there, like in setting this integrated farm, we need to buy livestock, we need to buy like some biogas, whole system we need to establish, construct this, we need to buy the system fish, we need to spend on fish, cattle, poultry, we need to buy these. So upfront cost is very high, and again to maintain all these we need additional labor. Next is about social acceptability, because there is a lack of integrated role model of integrated farming system. So farmers go back to the traditional methods only, that they do not know about the actual output of this whole integrated farming system. There are no examples or the role models of showing that how good is this integrated farming system is. Then what can we do for the promotion? So there are the governmental schemes like National Mission on the Sustainable Agriculture. It encourages this integrated farming practices. Next is about institutions, what we are doing at the research institution level. So we have instituted Mahatma Gandhi Integrated Farming Research Institute in Bihar for more and more research and development, and to find out how we can optimally use it, how can we can use it in more efficient way. So the research and development is going on, and for that we have established one institution also. Okay, so in the conclusion you can write some summary that yes, it is very crucial for the farmer, like for the farmer's income, for the farmer's stable income and diversified income, and you can also use the aspect of the climate change and with respect to the environmental sustainability and nutritional and the food security. Okay, so we need to adopt it on wide scale, and for that government has to put some inputs for that, come up with the new policies so as to support this system in a holistic way. Okay, so moving on to the model answer, starting with some definition. You can make two diagrams in this particular system, like one the components of the integrated farming system, and the second would be how the one waste from the one particular aspect is using as a resource for the negative for the second aspect. Then potential, then challenges, some steps taken, then finally conclusion. Okay, so moving on to the next question. Discuss the potential of millets as a viable alternative to the water intensive crops in the water scarce regions of India. So this is the first demand. We need to also suggest some policy measures needed to encourage their adoption by the farmers. So this is the second demand. Okay, so the first demand of this question is asking about the potential of millets as the alternative to the water intensive. It means they can withstand in the water scarce region. So with this only you can you can make your definition that the millets are the coarse grain cereals which are mostly grown in the drylands as the feed and the fodder crops, and you can utilize this aspect like due to the brunt of the climate change, this has negatively impacted the availability of the water resources. So to withstand that, or like to minimize those impacts, and also to ensure the food security, we have some alternative. Instead of making like rice and wheat crop production, we have an alternative as millets that can withstand this low availability of water, and also they can be produced in the water scarce regions also, like where the water is not that much available, like on the dry lands, in the drought prone regions also. So with this context you can start your introduction, you can write some definition, you can also write some adaptability, like they can withstand the less water availability, etc. And what are the importance, that it holds very vital importance in the water scarce region, especially in these regions. Okay, moving on to the first part of the question, potentials of the millets. So potential of the millet, and the question is very specifically asking about as an alternative to the water intensive crops. So what is the potential? That they have the low water footprint, means they do not require much water. Like for rice we need 2500 to 3500 liter of water for the 1 kg production of rice, but with respect to millets we need only 800 to 1000 liter of the water. So there is a substantial water savings with respect to millets production. So yes, they have the low water footprints. Next is about they can withstand, or they are the drought resilient crops. How? Because they have the deep root system. Even if the water is low or the nutrients in the soil is low, they can absorb the nutrients or the soil water or the moisture from the very deeper layers also in the soil horizons. So they can withstand the drought conditions. So they are very good or the apt for the areas or the region where there are the erratic rainfall patterns are there. Okay, next is about they have the tolerance against the salinity. So they can be used in the regions where there are the high evaporation rates, and due to climate change we know that the sea level rise is increasing. So the inundation of the coastal region with the sea water, it means the salts would be present over there. So yes, these millets can be produced in those coastal regions as well, where there is a sea water intrusion in the coastal areas. So they can be used in the soil eroded areas as well. Okay, so these are some extra points, these two. Then comes to the soil health. Let's see the how this millets production help in improving the soil structure. Like with respect to the water intensive crops, we need to inundate the land, or they require the more amount of the moisture or the water. So what they do, they depletes the top layer of the soil. So there is increasing cases of runoff. All the nutrients from the soil, they leach to the deeper layers of the soil. And with the normal crops, they do not have the very large root system. So this leaching of the moisture and the nutrients go beyond their roots level. So all these aspects with the respect to the water intensive crops, they reduces the efficiency, they reduces the fertility, they reduces the soil productivity, and they increases the soil erosion or the depletion or the degradation of the soil. But with respect to the millets, they do not require much water, and instead with their nitrogen fixing capabilities, they increases the soil fertility. They do not deplete soil, instead they build the good soil structure. So this is the soil health. With respect to these two additional points, you can also write that with respect to the farmers, they ensure the farmers' income, and they provide the nutritional security, they provide the food security, and they can withstand the climate change impact as well. So you can write with these two aspects. Now, because the question is asking about, we need to suggest some policy measures to encourage their adoption by the farmer. So you can write some connecting line between the potential and the policy measure, that there are some challenges with respect to the millets production. That is why we need some policy measures to enhance the productivity and to face these challenges. Whatever the farmers are facing, we need to take care of all those challenges with respect to the policy measures. Okay, so what are the challenges? The very first thing is that there is a reducing land under this millet production. There is less awareness, that is why there is less demand in the market also for the millet production. And due to the skewed policies like MSP for rice and wheat majorly, so they have changed the cropping patterns of the land also. Like government emphasized more and more production for the wheat and rice for ensuring the food security, and the millets were lagged behind in that process during the green revolution. So we need to take care of all this right now. So that is why we need some policy measures from the side of government to take care of all this. So next is about the policy measures, what we need to write. The first is MSP, because there is a very less inclusion, only for 3-4 crops majorly government procures with the related to MSP. So we need to include more and more millets crops with respect to MSP. Next is about, we need to integrate this millets with respect to the PDS and also with respect to the ICDS, Integrated Child Development System, so that there is increasing offtake of millets in this procurement process for PDS and for ICDS. And we can also increase the use of millets in the government offices, so that they will be more aware about this usage of the millet production, of the millets, the benefits of the millets. And also when the demand will be increased with respect to the millets, the cultivation land under the millet will also increase. Next is about, we need to promote the direct sowing, and we need to increase the seed subsidies with respect to the millets. Why direct sowing? Because again we need to reduce water for this water demand for the millets. See, with the indirect sowing for the transplantation, they require 800 to 1000 liter. So what if we are also promoting with the direct sowing method? They can further be reduced. We can further reduce the demand for the water for the millets production. Next is about, we need to develop the value chain, like we need to develop the storage system, the processing system, and also with respect to the marketing system. Next is about, we need to make our public aware about its benefits, about its low glycemic index, so that they can be used with respect to the diabetic people, how they are very rich, the powerhouse of the nutrients like multiple vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, etc. And we need to educate the farmers and the consumers as well, how they are benefited for the whole ecosystem, for the soil, for the farmer, stable income with respect to climate change, and with respect to the health benefit for millets. Okay, so this is the body part. Moving on to the conclusion. So millets offer the sustainable solution for the water scarce region. With respect to the policies, with respect to the financial investments, and with respect to the awareness, we can increase the food security, nutritional security, we can increase the farmers' income, and also the agriculture would be sustainable then. So this thing you can write in the conclusion. Okay. Moving on to the model answer, starting with the definition of the millets. You can write some data that India is the largest producer and the second largest exporter of millets. You can also know about, you should also know about what is the distribution pattern in India, and also with respect to the global scale, what are the regions where the millets production is high, etc., for the prelims point of view as well. Okay. Then coming on to the potential, then policy measures, then finally conclusion. Okay. Moving on to the next question. Examine the significance of land pooling as an alternative to the land acquisition in India, highlighting its potential benefits and limitation. So we are writing about land pooling, how this is as an alternative to the land acquisition. So we need to write the potential benefits, and we also need to write down the limitations. So for this, first we need to understand why we acquire the land. For the development prospects, for developing the physical infrastructure in any area, we need land, and for that we need some land acquisition policy. But the land acquisition is attached with some criticism, like the lack of the adequate compensation and the resettlement assurances. So the government has come up with the new and the more innovative idea of land pooling. Now, what is this land pooling? This is more participatory and more voluntary mode of land acquisition near the urban areas for the developmental prospects. Now, what is this land pooling? The owners voluntarily sign the ownership rights over the single agency, or you can say the government, whosoever is building those developmental projects. And this agencies or the government returns the smaller portion of the land to the landowners after the developmental activities are done. Let's see via an example. This is the patch of landowner A, this is B, this is C, D and E. These are the multiple landowners. Government is demanding some infrastructural development over this area. So now the government has developed this whole area, and what the government has returned, the land patch, the smaller land patch to A, to B, to C and D and E. Now these land patches are more consolidated at the one place. The development has already been occurred. Their land prices are increased. Now these land patches are not undeveloped or underdeveloped, but these are fully developed. Their land prices are risen up now. So that is why government gives the small patch of land after doing all the developmental activities, but their land value has already been increased. And these landowners A, B, C, D, E and has got now the developed land, means there are more amenities in this particular area. So this is land pooling. So this is win-win situation for both, like for the government as well as for the community, or you can say the landowners. For the government, our infrastructural development has already been done. Our GDP is increased, our economic growth, economic development has already been stimulated. And with respect to the people, they have got their land at the high values, and they got the land, the developed land. And they are getting the more amenities, the developmental benefits, the cost of the benefits, they have been shared with the landowners. Okay, so this way you can start the introduction, that you can write some definition, you can give also some example that Delhi's DDS developmental projects is based on the land pooling policy. Moving on to the body part, we need to write down the significance of the land pooling. So you can divide it into the two parts with respect to the benefits to the government and the benefits to the landowners. So the benefits to the government. So the government do not have a need to spend on the land acquisition in the initial stages only. So all the cost for the land acquisition is now being saved. So there is no upfront cost. And when earlier the government is spending the huge amount in the land acquisition, now it is getting saved. So the government can build the better infrastructure. They require less money, less finances to build that infrastructure project, and that can be sourced from the small and the medium loans, and that can be repay in a very easy manner as well. So these infrastructure projects are better in quality and also with respect to the financial demands from the banking system or from the external system. Next is about very less conflicts are attached with this land pooling. How? Because this is more participatory, this is more voluntary. People are participating in this process. The government is not acquiring the land against the wishes of the landowners. Next is about with respect to the higher tax base. Like now the land values have increased, now the development has been already done in this land, so the land values are increased, so as the taxes with respect to the local bodies in those areas. Next is about it requires the less time for the infrastructural development, because all these land acquisition, the very slow process is due to the acquisition of the land. Now this is eliminated, so there is a less time that is required for the infrastructural development. Next is about the benefits of land, benefits to the landowners. So first is they get the developed land, they get the developmental amenities over their areas. So and also there is an increase in the value of land, better infrastructure. Yes, they have got the developed area now. Next is about non-displacement strategy of the land assembly. Now the landowners are not displaced and resettled anywhere else. So yes, they are more familiar with those areas and they are getting the better infrastructure in return. Okay. So moving on to the issues, the challenges with respect to the land pooling. The very first is about the lack of transparency. So there are again the concerns with respect to the information that should be in the public, that is not there. So there are the concerns with respect to the transparency. Next is about the mandated consent. For the land pooling, all the landowners has to give their consent to that particular agency or the government that we are ready to participate or voluntary doing or giving up our ownership rights to the government. So there are the mandated consent requirement. So to ask for the consent from all the landowners, to make them aware that what are the benefits of this redevelopment, again to ask from the multiple owners, and again it takes the very huge time also sometimes, and this makes it as a slow process. And also these landowners have the avenue to case the lawsuit in the judiciary also. So again they can deny their consent once they have already given. So again all these poses some challenges on the land pooling policy as well. Next is about legal framework. This is same, that there they have the avenues that they can go to the judiciary or they can go to the courts and to deny their consent. Next is about that this land pooling. Why we have come up with this land pooling? Because the land prices in the urban areas are very high. So we just cannot acquire the land and pay the landowners very huge amount. So we have come up with the land pooling and we are giving them the developed areas and also giving them the better infrastructure and giving them the patches of land, because this can compensate with the higher land cost in that areas. So this land pooling policy is very successful in the urban areas where the land prices are very high. We as a government cannot afford to acquire the land and give them the lump sum very huge amount to the landowners. But these are not very successful in the rural areas where there is already the very less prices of the land. So the government or any agency who wants to do the developmental projects, that will be in the losses if they want to develop that area also, and if they will give the rural people that already developed projects. Okay, so again, next is about the limited adoption by the state. So various states have the various priorities with respect to this land acquisition and the land pooling. Mainly in Gujarat, Maharashtra and Punjab, it's more or less somewhat successful, but others are not paying heed for this land pooling policies. Conclusion, you can write some summary that we need to make the transparency process more accountable to the people, so that people have the trust generated in the government. Otherwise, they also have the fear that once the government is taking our land, might be they'll not give back whatever we are demanding. Like, take an example of the Delhi's DDA. They want to redevelop the slum areas, but as this land pooling policy requires the everybody's consent, mandatory consent, but the people, the landowners, were not giving their consent because they have the fear. They do not trust their government that once we give up our ownership right and transfer it to the government, whether we will get back or not. So for this, we need to increase the transparency. We need to get the public's trust. So how we can do this? With the legal refinement, with the state convergence. So this can be viable alternative to land acquisition in the India's urban future. Okay. Moving on to the model answer, starting with the some definition. You can also make some diagram, then significance, limitations, and finally some conclusion. Okay. So this is it from my side for today. Thank you and have a nice day and keep writing.